Hey, hey, hey! Welcome to my cozy corner of the internet. This is Nephilim VA bringing you the 17th chapter of Inheritance, written by A is for Amy 71 on AO3. The recommendation exam is underway. Let's hope Izuku does well. But before we Detroit smash into the chapter, here are the trigger warnings. This fanfiction is for mature audiences with canon-typical violence and a trigger warning for major character death. If that isn't your style, then I recommend Shades of Green, which is written by Maybe It's Friendly on AO3. It can be found on my channel! Canon Divergence is the name of the game and indulges the what-ifs of Midoriya Izuku having a quirk. But with that being said, the chapter summary is as followed. The test for the recommended students. Now I implore you to sit back and relax whilst I read to you. Chapter 17. Next, we'll have a practical demonstration of your abilities and general physical fitness. Izuku wondered how much was riding on this particular aspect. They all had such amazing quirks that there was no way for him to judge who would make the best impression on the committee. The physical test began with a light run around the track, just 2 kilometers, so they could warm up. They were asked not to use their quirks for this portion of the test, and so Izuku stretched and set his usual easy rhythm as if it was part of his daily run. As he rounded the first curve, he could see Yoarashi keeping pace with Todoroki, and was close enough to hear what they were saying. "Wow, you've got an amazing quirk," Yoarashi was saying to Todoroki. His tone was friendly, even admiring, as he jogged next to the other boy. Todoroki didn't answer, and kept his eyes forward. Izuku raised his eyebrows at the snub, but kept listening. He noticed that Honanuki had jogged up beside him, and glanced over and nodded at the other boy with a smile. It was hard to tell if the other boy was smiling because he didn't have lips, but he did wave. "So your father's Endeavor, right?" Yoarashi said to Todoroki, not giving up on making a friendly connection. "It must be great to have the number 2 hero in Japan to—" "Don't talk about my father. We're nothing alike," Todoroki snapped, finally showing some emotion. Too bad that emotion was anger. Yoarashi looked surprised for a moment and missed a step before catching up again. "Didn't mean to hit a sore spot," he said apologetically. "Look, I don't know what your game is. Just stay out of my way," Todoroki snapped, picking up his pace to leave Yoarashi behind. "Hey, wasn't that a little rude?" Izuku couldn't help saying loudly to Todoroki's back. "I know we're competing, but there's no reason we can't be polite." "It's fine," Yoarashi said with gritted teeth as he fell back to run with the other 2. "I really didn't expect anything else from him. He's his father's son after all." "You know Endeavor?" Honanuki asked curiously. "Not really. I used to idolize Endeavor, so I was totally stoked when I met him once right after he beat a villain. He acted the same way as that one," he said and nodded towards Todoroki's back. Izuku said speculatively. "I've heard that Endeavor is as hot-headed as his quirk, but that guy uses ice." "Don't worry about it," Honanuki told them both. "Competition can sometimes bring out the worst in people." They finished their run with the girls leading the way and gathered around the principal once more. There was a rumbling under their feet and Izuku was prepared to levitate if necessary. But it wasn't a threat of any kind. Cement walls were rising up from the ground at regular intervals, the full length of the field, 1 row of walls per applicant. The walls were about 2 meters apart and 3 meters tall, and Izuku counted 8 of them in each row. Izuku saw a hero he recognized erecting the walls, and had to concentrate on not getting distracted. "Thanks to Cementos," Nezu waved to a blocky figure at the far end of the field, "we can begin our first demonstration. You'll each begin in front of a row and navigate your way to the end of the row as quickly as you can. You may not go round the sides of any of the obstacles, and you must at least touch each one of them as you pass it. The rest is up to you. You may use your quirks in any way you see fit.
How will we be graded?
Tokage asked, raising her hands in the air. Speed, inventiveness, and mastery of your quirks, Nezu supplied immediately, not necessarily in that order. They all nodded and took their places, waiting for their signal to start. Izuku already knew how he intended to tackle this task, but wished they were doing it one at a time so that he could observe the others in action. A whistle blew and Izuku levitated to the top of the first wall and jumped. He caught the top of the second wall under his gloved palms and launched his body forward, landing on the third wall on his feet, then jumped again, hands springing and flipping to the end. He landed on his feet in the grass on the other side of his row and looked to see who would beat him to the end of theirs. Yoarashi grinned at him and waved, and Tokage looked satisfied as she looked up at the backside of the final wall of her row. Izuku wasn't sure which of them had beat the other, time-wise. Todoroki landed next, practically tied with Hononuki, who walked through his wall. Yaoyorozu wasn't far behind, dropping to the ground shortly after.
Well done, all of you,
Nezu congratulated, appearing in the smallest golf cart Izuku had ever seen. A rumbling later, and the walls had receded into the ground. Instead, back where they had begun the race, there was a pile of what looked like 4 cannonballs in front of each of them.
The next challenge will be to move those balls from that end of the field to this one as quickly as you can. You will start from here, race to the balls, and work from there. You may use your quirks in any way you see fit. The only rule is that they cross the line left behind by the final wall you just passed. Then you will end the race back here after they've all crossed the line.
The line was quite visible from the lack of grass in the space the wall had occupied.
Any questions?
No one spoke up. They all took their places and waited for the whistle to sound. Izuku charged up one for all, feeling the green webs of sparks tingling along his skin as he took a racing stance. At the whistle, he shot forward and stopped just in time, depending on his balance to keep him from tumbling over, from the abruptness of it. He hefted one of the balls and wondered if it was made of the same stuff as Sir's hyperdensity seals. It was very heavy. He picked up a second ball and held one under each arm as if they were playground balls and sprinted back the way he'd come. He dropped them with a thud, then ran back for the other 2. He was finished in under a minute, but Yoarashi had still beaten his time. He had used strong, precise whirlwinds to pick up all 4 balls and transfer them all simultaneously at an insane speed. Izuku had actually cheered out loud for him when he saw it while he was sprinting with his first 2. From the finish line, Izuku could see Todoroki forcing his across the field, using his ice to make them slide. Tokage had separated her hands from her arms and was sending them carrying a ball between them, slowly. The problem was that the balls were so heavy, her hands struggled to keep them above the ground. Still, she was making progress, sending other body parts to help ease the burden. Hononuki was having a bit of trouble, as softening the ground beneath the balls would just make them sink. It took him a short while to soften the balls themselves and break them up into smaller, more easily movable pieces. He would still have to transport them all, but it would be easier at least. Yaoyorozu had lifted the hem of her shirt and produced a sort of catapult, but wasn't able to lift any of the balls due to their weight. She thought about it for a moment and turned to Hononuki. Izuku watched as they had a conversation. Then Hononuki moved to turn Yaoyorozu's cannonballs into smaller pieces, while she began to launch his pile across the finish line. Once he was finished breaking down the balls, they worked together to launch her pile. They finished at nearly the same time as Tokage, looking very pleased with themselves.
Inventiveness and cooperation are essential tools in hero work, just as important as strength or quirks,
Nezu told them when they were all finished.
Well done to all of you.
There were 2 more exercises as individuals. One that dealt with getting across a huge pit without touching the bottom in any way, and another that tested their skills at devising a way to climb to the top of a very tall pillar, courtesy of Cementos again. Once they had all gathered together once more, there was a team exercise where they all had to work together. The game was called Human Knot. They all stood in a circle and followed Nezu's instructions to put their right arm into the center and grab the hand of one other player's hands, not immediately beside them. Then they did the same with their left arm. Once they were all holding hands, the object was to untangle themselves, until they were standing in a circle with their hands still joined. They were not allowed to let go of each other at any point. Izuku was certain that he was holding Yaoyorozu's hand in his left, and judging by the temperature, Todoroki's hand in his right. They had only been connected for a few seconds when Yaoyorozu looked up at Todoroki.
I would appreciate it if you kept your comments to yourself. We're all taking this seriously. If you don't want to participate, then feel free to withdraw your application.
Izuku stared at Yaoyorozu in surprise, and he noticed that he wasn't the only one. Todoroki looked stunned, and the others looked curious. "What are you talking about?" Todoroki demanded.
You just said this was stupid and a waste of time,
Yaoyorozu accused. "No, he didn't," Izuku said in confusion. "He didn't say anything."
I am not crazy, she said to Todoroki, looking scandalized. How dare you?
Everyone was looking at Yaoyorozu uneasily now.
Is there a problem?
Nezu interrupted when none of them moved to try to untangle the knots their arm made. Something strange is going on, Todoroki said at once. She's listening to my thoughts.
That's not possible, Nezu said, sounding interested. None of you are telepathic. That we know of.
His eyes shifted to Izuku. It's not me, Izuku said defensively. I'm hearing her thoughts too, Todoroki said, a slight blush dusting his cheeks. What's going on? Whose hands are you holding? Nezu asked Todoroki. I've got his left hand, Izuku said. I think so anyway, it's hotter than a normal hand would be.
I've got his right,
Tokage volunteered.
It's cold. I'll squeeze the hands of the people I'm holding on to, Yaoyorozu said. That should be the fastest way to find out.
Izuku felt her squeeze and nodded. That's mine. And mine, Hononuki said.
Most interesting, Nezu said. Let's experiment, shall we? Everyone let go of each other's hands for now.
Everyone unlinked and stood looking at each other in confusion.
Midoriya-kun, take one of Tokage's hands, Nezu directed.
Izuku moved to where Tokage was looking at him warily and held out a hand to her. She took it after a moment and then looked at Nezu.
Very good. Now, Tokage, I'd like you to sing a simple song in your mind. Something anyone can recognize, and keep doing it until I say stop.
Tokage thought for a moment, then nodded and closed her eyes. Izuku assumed she had started the silent song.
Yaoyorozu, would you please take Midoriya's other hand?
She did and gasped almost immediately.
Sakura, Sakura!
Tokage opened her eyes and nodded warily.
Fascinating, Nezu announced. Both of you can let go. Midoriya-kun, please take Hononuki's hand.
Izuku did as he was instructed. Hononuki sang a simple song in his head this time, and Yoarashi was asked to take Hononuki's hand. When he did, he couldn't tell what song the other boy was thinking about, but when Nezu told him to hold Izuku's other hand, he named the song quickly.
What does this mean?
Yaoyorozu asked. Izuku deflated, dropping the hands in his and shaking his head in resignation. That's number 13, isn't it? He said glumly. It seems to be the case, Nezu said, sounding cheerful. You had no idea you could do this before now? Izuku shook his head. No, sir. I don't really hold people's hands, ever. Izuku couldn't remember the last time he had held two people's hands at once. In grade school PE, when he was very young? How long had he even had this quirk? It could be years!
Fascinating, fascinating,
Nezu repeated, bouncing on his feet. Everyone was looking at them both strangely, and Yaoyorozu finally broke the silence.
Did Midoriya-kun just manifest a new quirk? So it seems,
Nezu confirmed. Looks like it, Izuku answered at the same time, with less enthusiasm.
Does that mean someone? She ventured uneasily.
Probably not, Izuku said. Not recently, anyway. I probably got this one a while ago and just never met the requirements to make it work.
I will conduct some research to be sure, but Midoriya-kun is likely correct. He probably attained this quirk without realizing it. Sometime in the past, Nezu agreed.
What about the human knot? Yorashi asked.
We'll forego that exercise for now, Nezu told them easily. That was more of an icebreaker than part of the actual exam. The final part of today is individual interviews with the committee members. If you follow me back inside, you can get changed and you will each be called in turn. Once your interview is complete, you are free to leave, and you can each expect your results in 1 week.
Once they were in the locker room, Yorashi practically exploded with excitement. Dude, that was insane! You're like a human telephone line right into people's brains. Can you hear any of it? No, Izuku said, trying to be patient, even though he felt like punching a wall. I had no idea what was going on until Principal Nezu figured it out. You don't sound stoked, Yorashi observed, sounding hyper. I'm not really. What use is a quirk like that? Izuku asked. You do have a point, the other boy admitted. I'm sure there's something cool about it, though. You'll just have to find it. I like your optimism, Izuku told him with a small but genuine smile. But some of my quirks are just kind of dumb. I want to see you pet Nezu, Yorashi said with an impish grin. Just 2 fingers down the middle of his head, and he could have a mohawk. Izuku grinned and Hononuki snorted out a laugh. I don't think that would be the best way to get on the principal's good side, Hononuki said, closing his locker and shouldering his bag. Probably not, but it would be really funny, Yorashi insisted. Izuku startled when one of the lockers behind them slammed shut with more force than necessary. They all turned their heads to see Todoroki snatch his bag and leave the room without a word or a glance at any of them. Yorashi scowled. Don't let him get to you, Izuku advised. This is a lot of pressure, and if his dad's the number 2, what do you think will happen if he bombs this test? That's gotta be hard. Yorashi shook his head. I don't know, man. He just rubs me the wrong way. How's someone that unfriendly ever gonna be a hero? There are plenty of unfriendly heroes, Izuku said, thinking back to his notebooks full of observations. They usually don't get ranked very high, but it's possible. Look at his father, for instance. We should go, Hononuki said, motioning to the door. The 3 of them made sure they had all of their belongings and went to join the others. They were back in the room where they started earlier in the day. There were chairs against the wall, a small table with a chessboard set up, and a stack of magazines. It seemed like almost any waiting room anywhere. Tokage was already missing, and so Izuku surmised that she had been called for her interview first. Todoroki was sitting in a chair against the wall, and Yaoyorozu was talking to him, though he didn't look overly receptive. Juzo looked at the chess set and raised an eyebrow at Izuku and Yorashi in question. I'm not great at chess, Yorashi said, holding up his hands in demur. I'll play, Izuku said. I'm not that good, but I do like the game. They took seats opposite each other, and Yaorashi stood beside the table to watch. A few minutes later, Yaoyorozu joined the audience and watched as Izuku got trounced. Todoroki got called in next, and a short time later, Yaorashi was summoned. Good luck. I hope we're in the same class in April, Izuku said to the taller boy. Yaorashi waved and entered the side room where the committee waited. The chess game ended spectacularly bad for Izuku, and he bowed out and turned over his seat to Yaoyorozu. If she was as intelligent as Izuku suspected she was a much better match for Hononuki. It seemed that their opening moves had just been made when the door opened once more, and Izuku was called for his own interview. It was nice to meet both of you, he told them with a smile. Hopefully I'll see you in April. They both wished him luck, and he entered the room where the others had gone when they'd been called. There was a long table with 4 committee members and the principal sitting facing an armchair where they indicated Izuku should sit.
You can relax, young man,
a woman in a pinstripe suit told him with a small smile.
This is somewhat informal. We just want to get a feel for your personality and how we feel you'll fit in here at UA. There are 2 heroics classes in each year, Class A and Class B. We try to choose applicants for each that will best fit in with the teachers we have in place and can act as examples of what we expect from the other students.
We have a very difficult decision to make this week, added a man in a strangely purple business suit. We've seen very impressive performances from each of you. The other 2 committee members smiled and nodded in agreement.
If you would, Midoriya-kun, please tell us a bit about yourself and what you hope to get out of the heroics course, should you be admitted, Nezu said, his paws resting on the table in front of him.
Izuku wasn't sure exactly what to say. Sir hadn't prepared him to make any kind of impromptu speech, and everything he thought they needed to know should be in his file. To start with, I guess I would say that I've never really felt like a normal kid. I found out I got a quirk because my mother died protecting me in a train wreck caused by a villain. I inherited her quirk, and we just thought I'd gotten a quirk just like hers, but it turned out to actually be hers. He wiped sweaty hands on his pant legs before he could stop himself. People treat you differently when your mum dies. Since then, I've kept getting quirks and my life was just kind of different from other kids, I guess. A villain found out about my quirks from a doctor, and he blackmailed a very nice woman to become my babysitter and used her to get his hands on me, because he was interested in using my quirk in some way. My babysitter confessed, and she and her family had to be relocated, and so did me and my dad. Since then, I've been working hard to do whatever I can to get into UA, so I can become a hero, and keep that sort of thing from happening to other people. Kids should be able to have a normal life, you know? That's what I want most. Very well said, young man, one of the other men said with a firm nod.
I must say I was very interested when I read about your quirk. I thought about how easy it would be for you to gather new quirks for your personal use by simply visiting hospitals, but there's no evidence that you have ever considered doing so. Why is that?
The woman in the pinstripe suit asked. It's not as though the quirks would be missed. Izuku wondered if this was some kind of trick question, but answered honestly. Because it would be wrong, he said. I can't control it when I inherit a quirk, and I feel like it would be wrong to circle like a vulture because someone with a powerful or really cool quirk is about to die. It's disrespectful. I've been learning about ethics, and I think that if I had knowledge beforehand about someone like that dying, it would be my responsibility to ask permission, I guess. But it seems kind of wrong to go looking for a power like that. I'm thankful for what I have, but I don't ever go looking for more. I avoid hospitals as much as I can too. I don't know if there's a limit to how many quirks I can inherit, or if my body can handle having many more. So far I've been lucky, but that doesn't mean I will always be. All of the committee members nodded along with what he was saying, but remained non-committal.
Thank you, Midoriya-kun. You can expect to receive your results by mail in 1 week.
Izuku stood, bowed to the committee, thanked them, and exited through a different door than the one he'd entered through. He wasn't sure what to think. The night of the recommendation exam, Izuku made a large pot of curry. It was something of a comfort food, and when his dad came home, he ladled out 2 huge servings. They sat at the table, and before his father could even ask how his day was, Izuku spoke. So I have another quirk I didn't know about. His father paused with his spoon halfway to his mouth and stared. You're kidding me. I wish. Let's hear it. Izuku told him all about it, from the beginning of the exam to the end. He'd already called and talked to All Might and Sir about it, and his father said the same thing they said. Huh. Izuku rolled his eyes. How do I know where it came from? Izuku asked in a voice that was as close to a whine as he ever got. How do I know that evil bastard didn't force it on me during one of those creepy field trips where he did who knows what to me? You don't, his father said simply, but it doesn't really matter now that he's gone, does it? You might have had this quirk for years without knowing it. There's no point in getting upset about it now. I guess. It's just embarrassing, you know? I was there with 5 other kids with amazing quirks and mind-blowing control over them, and suddenly I'm showing a brand new one I didn't even know I had. Izuku vented tiredly. I was supposed to be making a good impression on everyone. It sounds to me like you did, his father said seriously. Aside from that little hiccup, it sounded like you handled everything really well. I did okay, Izuku admitted. But the others were so amazing. Endeavor's son was one of the kids. I didn't even know he had a son. And you call yourself a hero fanboy, his father teased good-naturedly. Ugh, Izuku answered, stuffing curry into his mouth. He'd been so busy explaining everything that his father was almost done with his food, and Izuku was only about halfway finished with his own meal. Don't worry too much about it, his father advised. I don't know about those other kids, but I've seen what you can do, and I know you're also pretty amazing. You'll find out in a week while the committee fought. Izuku barely had time to think about it as the week went by very quickly. Their teachers were busy cramming their brains with everything they needed to know for upcoming final exams, on top of students also taking entrance exams for high school if they weren't attending the one connected with their middle school. After school, Izuku was continuing his work at the beach and also being supervised at Might Tower by both All Might and Sir Nightai in various aspects of training. All Might was still convinced that the secret to perfecting his grip on One for All was to continue accelerating his weight training. Sir Nightai still gave him assignments that focused on ethics or hypothetical scenarios for them to discuss when there was time, but he'd taken on a new project. Sidekicks. There were 2 freshly graduated heroes that Sir had been keeping an eye on, and he felt that now was the time to bring them on board and train them up under the agency's umbrella. Once he deemed them properly prepared, they could even possibly become heroes with the Might Agency, thus keeping it going, even as All Might himself was stepping down. Izuku met them one day on the lower floors of Might Tower, introduced as a junior intern and a UA hopeful. Centipede was, well, pretty much a centipede. At least his head and neck. Izuku was fascinated by his quirk, which gave the man insectile limbs that he could coil around a suspect to detain them. From the neck down, he appeared to be a completely normal man. He was friendly and polite, and Izuku liked him immediately. He hoped he'd get to question him more for his notebook later. Bubble Girl was completely different. Her skin was a shade of light blue and her hair was a deeper shade of the same colour. Izuku felt his cheeks heat up when he noticed that her midriff was completely bare, and the underside of her breasts were completely exposed. The white shorts she wore over dark tights didn't seem to have a button or zipper, and hung open and looked like they were suggesting... His face got even hotter when he couldn't figure out where to look without feeling perverted. So Night Eye seemed amused by this, turning a laugh into a cough as Bubble Girl explained that her quirk allowed her to form bubbles filled with any scent she had smelled before.
"It's great for distractions,"
she said enthusiastically, seeming unaware of Izuku's discomfort, or kind enough not to mention it.
"I can send in a bubble that smells like smoke and make people think there's a fire. Things like that."
Distractions. Yeah, he managed to stammer out. Normally, Izuku would have been eager to discuss it, but at the moment he was studying her boots. Sir finally took pity on him and let him off the hook, telling him that it was possible that the mail would bring his exam results today. Izuku lit up and grinned, waving goodbye before practically sprinting for the elevator. He was lucky enough to catch the train just before it was about to pull out of the station, and bounced on the balls of his feet the entire way. He ran from the station all the way to his apartment building, fumbling with his keys to the mailbox, only to droop when he found it empty. Well, crap, he muttered. He opened the door for the stairwell and jogged up to the 15th floor and let himself into the apartment. "Welcome home," his father called from the kitchen. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I had a meeting this evening, but the person I was supposed to meet came down with the flu," his dad explained. "So I stopped at the place you like near my office and got a ton of gyoza and stir-fried veggies for dinner." "That was nice news anyway." "Let me put my stuff away and wash my hands," Izuku said, turning towards his room. "Don't you want this first?" his father called after him. Izuku paused to look back and saw his father holding up an envelope with the UA logo on the front. He dropped his bag in the middle of the hall and ran back. "It came?" "Open it," his dad urged with a grin. Izuku's hands were slightly shaking as he took the somewhat heavy envelope and tore it open. A thick stack of papers slid out, along with a metal disc, about the size of his palm. He set it on the table, intending to read the papers, when a hologram activated above the disc, and an image of the mammalian principal appeared.
"Greetings, Midoriya Izuku."
"What the?" his father asked quietly. Izuku shushed him and flapped a hand at him for good measure.
"It is I, the lovable Principal Nezu of UA High School. I would like to start by saying that the committee was very impressed with your abilities, and even more by your well-thought-out answers to our questions. We feel you embody the qualities we encourage and nurture here at UA, and would like to offer you one of the recommendation spots in the Heroics course in Class 1A. If you choose to accept this offer, please inform us by filling out the enclosed forms and returning them to us within the next 3 days. Congratulations, and we look forward to seeing what you can accomplish with us in the coming 3 years.
"Yes!" Izuku said at the same time as his father, and they grinned at each other before his father pulled him into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, Zu. Your mom would be thrilled too. I just know it." Izuku felt a lump in his throat at the words and squeezed his father's hand a little tighter before letting go. "Thanks, Dad." "This calls for a celebration. Let's eat." Izuku and his father demolished the food while talking animately about his acceptance and what a huge relief and achievement it was. "I'll take care of the dishes so that you can start filling out those forms. You don't want to lose a spot now that you've won it." Izuku took the papers carefully, not wanting his copy quirk to ruin the papers. He stopped to pick up his bag and closed himself in his room. His heart was still beating wildly, and the smile on his face felt like it might be stuck there for a while. "I need to call All Might and Sir," he said suddenly, patting his pockets for his phone. That night, he went to sleep with a lighter heart and a smile on his face. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate all the support you've given me. I apologise for no upload last week. It was the run-up to my musical theatre exam and I was rehearsing and in full prep mode. But the exam is over now and it went really well, so all I have to do is wait for the results. So thank you for waiting. All credits go to the original creator of this fanfiction. A is for Amy71 on AO3. I would highly appreciate it if you gave this video a like and you subscribe to the channel and you hit the notification bell to be notified of when I next upload. There is no pressure to do so though. Thank you for visiting my cozy corner of the internet. Keep growing my sunflowers. Mwah.